Yo, how's everyone doing? I'm glad this is so bright, I can't even see y'all. Also, respectfully, it's pronounced Astead, Herndon. Unfortunately, one of my 2025 resolutions is to correct white people when they mispronounce my name. So, unfortunately, it's Astead. Thank y'all for coming here. Shout out to Joe, shout out to House of SpeakEasy, shout out to other authors who have talked tonight. I thank y'all for hanging around because I'm actually fairly nervous. I've never done anything with a live performance before. And so, this is different than a writing. I'm usually a writer, I'm a podcaster. You can block podcasting out. Here, there's like a real, palpable call and response type energy. And it reveals a secret, honestly, that I think most of my community doesn't want y'all to know. But if there's a theme of tonight, it's going to be that I'm going to reveal a couple of these secrets. And the first is that print journalists are ugly. Yeah. If we were hotter, we would be TV journalists. If we were funnier, we would be comedians. We are forced into the path of ugly and angry, which is a difficult place to exist, You see a hot person in the newsroom, and you actually jump scare, what are you doing here? It's like reading a Palestinian in Legacy News, I knew you existed. I didn't expect you to be here. Oh, y'all weren't ready for that, huh? Buckle up, there's a lot more. We're just getting started, all right, y'all? The biggest thing I would say is, honestly, is that, you shouldn't be surprised because I'm a lot of things. I think I'm, nice. I think I'm a good journalist. I think I'm all of whatever. But one thing I'm not is woke. LOL. At the silence. I'm not woke. I'm not. I honestly find journalism to be kind of incompatible with it, what I deal with is in gray areas, in the black square land acknowledgement Instagram era. It's very black and white, there's only one right answer. And I remember actually 3 moments in the kind of craziness of 2020 that reminded me of just how distant I was from wokeness. The first was I was in my apartment, I'll never forget, and I was reading in this kind of peak kind of corporate craze of we stand for black people, blah, 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 blah. And Fruit of the Loop sent a statement that said Gushers would not be Gushers without the black community. Deadass, I'm serious. Look it up. Insane. Honestly, we should just acknowledge that 2020 was a different era time. I promise you, I don't hold y'all white people to it. I know you didn't mean it, It's all good. The second thing I remember from that year was actually a moment we had at a DEI training at the Times, which is when they asked journalists, should journalists only write about stories that they have firsthand experience about? And I thought that was insane. Do I only get to write about black people? My job is elections. That's a lot of white people. Why are we acting as if that is a thing that, if anyone can tell stories about others, it should be us, But that wasn't the feeling at the time. The third thing I remember that was also absolutely, I would say actually the most dangerous one of all, in terms of knowing that year was kind of the twilight zone, was simply how many white women were trying to hook up with me. Crazy. Dangerous, in fact. I'm from Chicago. That's not cute, that's alarming. There was no time in my life I was more desirable than was the Elizabeth Warren New York Times reporter after George Floyd got murdered. Yep. Ask yourselves why. So I'm not woke. Actually, in fact, I actually got kicked out of my group chat the other day. You're laughing, I'm serious. I got kicked out of my group chat the other day because I got tried and convicted of homophobia. True. I know you're shocked. Straight dude, how? Homophobia? Do they know I live in Bushwick? Do they know I went to a lesbian wedding last week? You know, I know my moon and my rising, you know. But I'll give you the lay of the land. I'll give you how it happened. My boy was like, I don't find Zendaya attractive. And I was like, offensive, okay? Wrong. And I was like, that's so wrong. And he was like, she looks like a bobblehead. And I was like, whoa, this is getting more offensive by the second. And important for the story, you know, he is gay, you know, and that's important for the story, not just like, you know, facts randomly. And I said, why would I even argue with you about sex appeal? You know? The only thing you find sexy is like poppers and men in straight relationships. And I got kicked out. But for the record, I believe in, like, you know, the crew brings you the quorum. I said sorry, you know, like, I watched Glee, we all good, you know. But it emphasizes the fact that, like, I never was down with that kind of very specific experience of, like, progressive projection. And the real tell, honestly, I don't know why people expected this of me. I mean, I actually think helpful context here is they said, you know, I host a New York Times political podcast, which is true. But the big thing, if you ask some people, is like, I've been like the Democratic Party's like #1 enemy the last year and a half. I don't know if y'all know this, but like, it's been a big drama. It's because I was like reporting these things that they didn't want to talk about, and it was really hard and all this stuff. People were like, what was it? What were you saying? And it was that Joe Biden was old. Dead ass. That's what got me in trouble. In fact, actually, I was in therapy once. Yeah, I have emotional intelligence. And I remember telling my therapist, I was like, yo, it was right after the debate. I was like, I'm in this stuff because we're in this, like, they're all mad at me. We were talking about Joe Biden. She's like, what? What do you mean? Like, what's going on? And I was like, saying Joe Biden is old is unpopular. And she didn't get it. I had to spend my hard-earned dollars spending 5 minutes explaining to her why saying Joe Biden was old actually got you in trouble. Because actually everyone with eyes already knew it. Everyone with a fucking Twitter account, it's a TikTok account, pick one, already knew it, you know? What it was a group of people who had convinced themselves not to believe what was in front of their eyes. But like, honestly, the big tell that like I have not like, you know, ascribed to the conventions of blah, 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 is I work for the New York Times. Like, let's be real. No one hates the left more than the mainstream media. Nobody. It's funny when I'm at Trump rallies, I'm like always like, you know, I'm at some Trump rally, they do their thing where they're like, the mainstream media is in league with the Democratic Party to bring the rise of socialism in America. And I actually want to always like jump in the middle and be like, yo, reporting live from the inside. New York Times and CNN employee here, you don't get more central. That's not true. What? Socialism? That is an insult to the generational wealth in those buildings. What? You think they want the squad to be president? But I love working at the Times. All right, don't tell my bosses, chill out. A couple weeks ago, someone told me I was a poor man's Ezra Klein. Which, for the record, #1, thank you. He's hot, I'll take that. But 2, I'm a news reporter. I'm not opinion, that's so much easier. There's so many opinions in this world. That's not what I do. I'm very proud to be someone who goes and talks to people who are conservatives, who goes and talks to people who are poor, who goes and talks to people who are formerly incarcerated, right? Like, I'm glad our work doesn't lead to a conclusion and people can choose what they want to believe versus not. I think it's an important part is the show and not the tell. Don't confuse me with those opinion reporters. In fact, honestly, you know, I think sometimes we take the news and opinion separation way too far, you know? I'll put you on some gang. Say, you're welcome, yeah. sometimes if you read the news pages of the New York Times, I'm like, have you opened the rest of the paper? You know? Why has Donald Trump's anti-trans ads been so effective? Have you read what the rest of what the opinion side is saying? You know? How did Eric Adams win on crime, on like a crime wave scare? I'm like, bro, page 15. We take it way, way, way too seriously. But in fact, I really love working there because I love newspapers. Love them. Love newspapers. Because honestly, I think that newspapers embody something that's increasingly lost in American life. How many efforts are there to say the truth as we know it every single day? Facebook is backing off of fact-checking, you know? Like TikTok, I mean, you know the rest. Right? How many efforts are there even left to say the truth, to correct yourself if you're wrong, to put stuff in context, to say things are more complicated than they might be, than they might seem on its face? That's like pretty rare. Honestly, I also have like newspapers in my blood, to be honest. My grandfather loved newspapers. He used to read the newspaper every single morning, you know, black newspapers, Pittsburgh Courier, Chicago Defender, but he would also read white newspapers. I say but like a shock. Shockingly, he cared about the opinions of white people. And he would always say, this is where they say things that they don't want black people to know. He would say this all the time. And it would make me, you know, it's a reminder in my like grown life about not just the convening power of media and how it's a place in which power talks, but specific to white media, it's been a place where power excludes, you know? Like, where folks have a conversation amongst themselves, and it's often very clear who's in it and who's out of it. You know, I was thinking about his quote, and about how times have changed. You know, times have changed. I probably make more money than like my ancestors did, thinking about like my legacy in that space. Barely, honestly, inflation, whatever. I definitely have more voice, right? Like, if they would have pissed this many Democrats off, ropes and trees, folks. But at the same time, there's been bad things that have changed too. Because if they were in front of me, right? If my ancestors were in front of me, I would tell them, like, I have to deal with the problem you never had to deal with. Integration. Like, looking back, I'm probably the first black person in my lineage to have a fully non-segregated life, which you might call progress. I call it the case for reparations. Y'all are not laughing. That's so funny. And it's because of this thing. I'm gonna put you on game again. White people do this thing at work where they're simultaneously the most gullible people alive, but also the most cutthroat. It's crazy. It's crazy. Gullible, we know. That's how we got Trump, right? I swear to God, I've been to every swing state, every place, blah, 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 inserted, I've been there. And the only people I hear say, I could not believe what he did on January 6th. After Charlottesville, oh my God, blah, blah, blah. Only white people say that. People of color vote for Trump all the time. We know this, big lesson of the 2024 election. But they're prioritizing other things, you know? They hate Democrats, they've decided other things matter, blah, blah. What they're not shocked is by Trump's existence, by him doing what he said he was going to do, by him, like, following through on his actions. That's specifically kind of white folks' phenomenon. But the other side is just as important too, because it's cutthroat. Because the problem is, the second white folks find out they were conned, it's everybody's problem. It's everybody's problem. Everybody can get it. Because they assume that, the second they didn't get it, of course no one else got it. When really, that's not really true. The character arc is way less surprising than y'all think. And right now, we see this happening in big spades. A DEI backlash that's coming from every side of the coin. Tech companies cutting every company that matters. Media won't hire another black person until 2 weeks before this South Carolina primary of 2027. And honestly, even thinking back to that white woman joke I made earlier, LOL, thinking about it, literally, the day before the election, one of the same people who sent me one of those, "Are you okay? Can we get a drink?" text me that her and her family voted for Trump. In Pennsylvania, not even a fake vote, a real one. That's what I'm talking about, cutthroat. The second the con becomes clear, it's time to lock in. But me, I saw it coming. I think that's my biggest benefit of being someone who travels the country and talks to people and legitimately cares about diversity and equity and inclusion. Not the fake words, not the black square on Instagram words, not like that, talk to my only black friend of Ivy League school words, but the real ones about class and education, about religion, about all of the things that make us kind of a unique and diverse country. I was hired at the time 6 years ago. I was 25. I was the only black person on the Times politics team. But it's not just that, to be honest. And to be real, other identities ended up mattering a lot more than race for me. I was probably the only Midwesterner, too. I was probably the only working class person. I was probably the only person come from evangelical home. And one thing I realized was that all of those identities actually make your work better. In an election, right? I'm not a DC reporter. In an election, all of those communities are who we need to be talking to. And it felt really clear to me that the reasons why we spend every election night so shocked is because the folks who are doing the work of informing us of how that might go weren't even equipped to talk about the country as it is. And so, to be honest, I had to think about my granddad's quote again. I thought again about what it means to be a journalist, what it means to be a newspaper reporter. And I've come up with a couple things. And I'm going to get out of here because I am so overtired. The couple things are, one, I think being a good journalist is about changing your mind. Do you have an idea of how you think this story is going to go? Or are you open to the idea that it might be a little different? Do you take the information in front of you and change your thesis? Do you hear people out and listen and actually write the nuance that's in the air? Because the experience I was having over and over in the lead up to the 2020 election was I was having conversations that were not as nuanced as the work I was producing. I knew people were more complicated. I knew they had several complicating factors. Our interaction showed that, but that's not actually how I presented them. And in that way, audio became a real refuge. It became a real opportunity for me to show people in their complexity and to make a bet on that rather than kind of cut and dry way that I think media and the country was working at the time. And the second thing I would say about the power of media is I've gone from being someone who is motivated by this strict idea of change, the saying that my work here is to do something that changes folks' minds or moves politicians, whatever. I don't care. What I'm here to do is actually to use the words that I think of with my grandfather about how media is often a conversation and who is left out, and to force new people in there, to bring a different type of historical record, to make sure that there is something that matters, to make sure there is something that's about the aspirations of truth, both today and tomorrow. Something that you can actually count on, with the ideas that I think are less and less true in our daily life. But to be truly honest, and that's only because y'all have gotten real quiet on me, that's not the real reason I made the show. Like, the real reason is it's spite. It's spite, truly. I was so sick of the fucking mess. I was so annoyed with the media ecosystem who was telling you one thing, and I knew they believed the other. And I knew, frankly, that the backlash was on the horizon. I wrote a Neiman Lab prediction in 2021 that said the moments of black and brown openness is gonna close. Look it up. I knew it. And so I acted with it in mind. And so when I think about the work that we did, I think about the historical record for sure. The episode we produced the day after Biden dropped out that said we asked him and the Democratic Party those questions for years before that point came. But I also think about all the folks we talked to and how we took the idea of DEI seriously. Not in the fake way, but in the actual uplifting of voices that are left out. And not just because that was a box check or a thing that could matter to us individually, but because that makes us better journalists. And the point about an election is actually the intersection of those things. So I hope that's what we're remembered for, to be honest. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know what my future is. I don't know, I'm so sick of folks asking me that. I don't know. But I want us to be remembered for folks who followed the story as it was happening, who prioritized the grassroots rather than the top down, who showed the country changing in real time and didn't act brand new after it was over. And in that way, that's a bet on people. That's a bet on people in the margins. That's a bet on people of color, on poor folks, on non-college, all of the above. So maybe I'm more woke than I think.